Hey everyone, this is MNL2, and today in this video, I want to take a look at all of the roller coasters that reside at Six Flags Great Adventure and find out which roller coasters are going to deliver the most intense experiences. For the purposes of this video, I will not be including every single coaster at the park in this list because some of the smaller coasters don't exactly have any intense moments. Also, when I refer to intensity or an intense moment, I mostly interpret it as having a feeling of sheer speed, considerable positive G-forces, or moments that make you feel like you're going to get ripped apart from the ride. Another thing, keep in mind that this list does not reflect how much I like each ride or how I rank them overall in the park. This list is simply based on which coasters I find to be the most intense. One more thing, if you find yourself enjoying any of my videos or find them interesting, informative, or entertaining in any way, then please feel free to like the video below to help out the channel and to help me to keep providing good content for your enjoyment. Thank you. So the Dark Knight coaster was actually an incredibly surprising coaster when it comes to a fun experience. This is easily my favorite non-spinning Wild Mouse that I've ever ridden. This coaster is honestly just the perfect example of a dark indoor coaster done right. The track isn't really visible, and there are a ton of special effects including lights, sound effects, and props that are illuminated in a way that makes only the props visible and not the entire ride structure around it. I don't have anything bad to say about this ride, and though it was a super cool coaster, in the end it's just a Wild Mouse, and it isn't exactly intense. Wild Mouse coasters are still fun due to the excessive laterals on each turn, and especially on this ride since you can't see those turns coming. Overall, it's a pretty tame ride, but when mixed with the awesome special effects, it's a super cool experience overall. Seriously, Kings Island and Kings Dominion, please take notes. Flight of Fear could be so much better. The Joker is a standard SNS 40 free spin coaster and was actually the second one ever built. Now, from what I can tell based on people's opinions on these things, is that these coasters provide some of the most mixed reviews ever. You'll have some people absolutely hating the shulky out of them, you'll have some people saying, meh, it's alright, and you'll have people like me absolutely loving them and thinking that they are incredibly fun and somewhat disorienting rides. Now, these rides can vary in intensity based on how much they spin, and since we aren't in Japan, the spinning can sometimes be limited. I have ridden the free spin at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom 5 times, and the one at Great Adventure 3 times. In general, they provided the same experience, but on one of my rides on Joker, I did actually luckily get flipped 4 times, and based on my 8 total rides on these things combined, 4 is definitely a lot. So I will say that the more you flip, the more intense these things can be, but say you only flip once or twice, this ride is honestly just fun and enjoyable and not exactly shockingly intense. I don't think graceful is the right way to describe these things, especially because sometimes they can be very jerky, but it doesn't really feel aggressive like it's trying to rip you from your seat. It more so feels like it's just trying to confuse you the entire time. Now, when it comes to graceful coasters, Superman Ultimate Flight, the park's B&M flying coaster, is honestly the perfect example. Now, for those of you who have never ridden a B&M flyer aside from any of the 3 Superman Ultimate Flight clones and think that the pretzel loop on these things or the experience in general is intense, well, go to Magic Mountain ASAP. Well, actually, not super ASAP, cause Tatsu caught on fire and is still broken. But my point is, Superman Ultimate Flight is an incredibly graceful coaster, with its only intense moment being the pretzel loop. Now, I do feel like I'm exaggerating the gracefulness just a bit, so I will say that the pretzel loop is still an intense and forceful element. And similarly to Tatsu's gargantuan pretzel loop, this smaller one still provides an awesome sensation, diving down into a nosedive, being plastered on your back, and then rocketing back up towards the sky. But like absolutely nowhere near as good as Tatsu's. And the rest of the ride is just there. It exists. That's kind of it. Yeah, this ride doesn't really do anything else that's memorable or intense, so I think it's safe to say that this ride is being carried by that pretzel loop, and without it, I would really put this ride at the bottom of this list. So you hear that, Tatsu? Even though I don't think you are very intense aside from the pretzel loop, just remember, it could be worse. Like a lot worse. Literally, the only advantage Superman has is that it's a lot smoother. But at the end of the day, I will take a much better and more intense experience than a tamer, smoother one. Oh, and also, you might think I'm talking about Superman vs. Tatsu, but in the long run, you really should have seen this one coming. Here, let me just say that previous sentence, but with different footage. I will take a much better and more intense experience than a tamer, smoother one. I'm sorry, it just had to happen sooner or later. I'm gonna try to keep this one short because I basically gave a full live reaction / review of Jersey Devil Coaster immediately after riding it, and so if you want to hear my full thoughts in depth of Jersey Devil Coaster, then feel free to check out this video right here. But anyways, to sum up my thoughts, Jersey Devil Coaster simply did not live up to my expectations at all. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun and enjoyable coaster with some decent moments, such as the first drop, Raven Dive, first giant airtime hill, the stall, and the spider turn thingy. Everything after the mid-course might as well not exist because of how slowly it traverses that section. Overall, this coaster was absolutely nothing like the original Raptors, nowhere near as intense, nowhere near as aggressive, and nowhere near as fun in my opinion. I will easily take Railblazer along with literally every other RMC I've ridden over Jersey Devil. It's a fun coaster with a few somewhat aggressive sections, but like, if your home park is Great Adventure and this was your first RMC, you need to ride like literally any other RMC in the world. So as much as I am tempted to mourn over Green Lantern First Flight, which was formerly located at Six Flags Magic Mountain, I'm now forced to talk about the one at Great Adventure. Anyways, Green Lantern is a B&M stand-up coaster, and after riding it, I honestly don't see how Riddler's has a pretty high reputation while Green Lantern is hated on by so many people. In my opinion, Green Lantern was actually considerably smoother than Riddler's, and pretty much equally as intense. Riddler's definitely provides a longer and more drawn-out experience, while Green Lantern is a bit smaller and tighter, although it isn't really aggressive or extremely intense like Riddler's. If I were to pick which one is more intense, I would definitely say Riddler's has more intense moments, but Green Lantern was still a solid coaster. I definitely enjoyed it, unlike most people, and though it wasn't anything special, it was still a fairly intense coaster overall. Now, I don't even know what to say. First of all, Bizarro just doesn't get any hate, which is a good thing. This is a solid coaster. Now, take away the theming and the scenery and mirror the whole ride. Okay, sure, it doesn't sound as good as Bizarro anymore, but like, now you've got Scream. Why does Scream get so much hate? I literally don't understand. Like, they're basically the same ride. They are both the same when it comes to smoothness, and they are both the same when it comes to intensity. Yes, I prefer Bizarro due to the cool special effects, which surprisingly actually worked. Good job, Six Flags. but like, Scream is still a fantastic coaster. It's okay, contriver. Take a deep breath. Just think happy thoughts. Anyways, let's talk about Bizarro. And I totally didn't forget to get any footage of Bizarro or anything, but luckily I have a ton of footage of Scream. So Bizarro has some really powerful moments, including the vertical loop, dive loop, zero G roll, and the cobra roll. The low to the ground helix is super forceful, and the final two interlocking corkscrews are super incredible, as they fly by some really cool mist machines that also act as head choppers. Overall, this ride's special effects and props really complement this coaster's experience, and I find it to be a solid and pretty intense roller coaster. Nitro is the park's B&M hypercoaster, and out of all the B&M hypers I've ridden, this one is my second favorite. However, I find it to be the most intense, so I haven't really paid very much attention to other people's thoughts or reviews on Nitro, so I'm not really sure how others feel about it, but basically, I found this coaster to deliver super sustained moments of floater on the first giant hills, and some pops of flowjector on the final series of smaller hills. The upwards helix before the mid-course is really the element that carries this ride this high on the list. It's a super long and sustained helix that will surely cause you to gray out, but it isn't too overwhelming like the helix on Goliath. Apart from that, it's somewhat graceful, but when combining the intense positive G-forces from that helix with the overall extremely cool feeling of sheer speed as this ride hauls through its layout, it definitely has its intense moments, and for those reasons, I feel like this ride deserves this spot on this list. Also, not to mention that legendary Mortal Kombat remix that plays in the station. Okay, I talk a ton about Batman clones in like literally every single one of my videos, and I talked about Magic Mountain's Batman in depth in my video ranking Magic Mountain's coasters by intensity, so this one will be kept brief. Batman the Ride, the park's B&M inverted coaster, is a very aggressive and intense coaster. The amount of positives pulled combined with the extremely aggressive inversions really create an extreme ride. This coaster really emphasizes that feeling that this ride is trying to rip you apart, and it is such an amazing sensation. It is a very short experience, but every single element on this ride will deliver incredibly intense feelings, with the only exception being that turnaround after the helix and before the first corkscrew. Oh, and one more thing, I found this coaster to basically be exactly identical to the one at Magic Mountain when it comes to ride experience. And for some of you, you might be thinking, well, duh, they're literally the same exact ride. But also, there's plenty of people who claim Magic Mountains to be considerably more intense than Great Adventures. I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning there is, but like, they're the exact same. They have the same height, same speed, same length, same elements, profiled the same way, they pull the same amount of G-forces, and neither are rough or headbanging. Literally the only reason I prefer Magic Mountains is because it has a cooler color scheme. That's it. El Toro was the wooden coaster that I was looking forward to the most on my trip, and for a good reason. This Intamin prefabricated woody is not only my #1 wooden roller coaster, but it is also one of the most intense roller coasters at Six Flags Great Adventure. Out of every roller coaster I have ridden, this coaster does the absolute best job at combining the sustained feeling of airtime as well as the aggressive ejector feeling of airtime. The first 3 giant hills will launch you out of your seat really freaking hard, and you will stay out of your seat for an incredibly long amount of time. Like, it feels like it lasts forever, and you get 3 of these hills back to back. It's such an aggressive coaster, and like, I just don't see how a wooden coaster can even physically do this, especially without destroying itself or derailing itself. In all seriousness though, I'm really glad no one was hurt in that incident. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, then I'm sure if you just Google El Toro, it'll pop up. Anyways, even after these first 3 gigantic hills, this ride is jam-packed with extreme positives and even more ejector moments later. The finale of this ride is also extremely intense as it banks you at 90 degrees, transitioning between each turn really fast and with a lot of snap. From start to end, this is an insanely intense coaster with incredible pacing as it keeps its speed and momentum up the entire time. Also, I didn't even mention the absurd first drop as it sends you absolutely flying out of your seat, especially in the back row. Seriously, this drop is better than Twisted Colossus's drop. Drops. It's super long and sustained, giving you ejector as you snap over the crest, following by floater as you cruise down the rest of the way. Overall, it's an insanely intense coaster, and though I found it to be extremely rough, sometimes painful, I still found it worth it to marathon this thing, getting a total of 16 overall rides on it. Anyways, I did have a pretty tough time deciding whether or not I found this to be more intense than the next coaster, but as I put more thought into it, I'm just gonna have to hand #1 to a coaster so powerful and intense, it literally just left me wanting more after every single ride. So before saying anything about KingDakar, it's time for me to reiterate that this list is solely based on which coasters I find to be the most intense and not how much I actually like them. That being said, El Toro is actually my #1 overall at Six Flags Great Adventure, but KingDakar is just a hair more intense in my opinion. This is the 3rd Intamin accelerator that I've ridden, and it is also the 3rd one that I'm going to end up talking about. I talked about accelerator at knots in depth in my video ranking knots as coasters by intensity, and KingDakar for the most part feels the same as accelerator and Top Thrill Dragster, but better than both. Yes, I'm zooming in on Top Thrill Dragster to emphasize the fact that I prefer KingDakar over Top Thrill Dragster. I'm not sure how much farther I can keep zooming in. Anyways, KingDakar is almost identical to Dragster when it comes to the insanely intense launch, the super powerful pull-up into the top hat, the mild floater, and then the sudden ejector dropping off the top hat, and the aggressive spiral down towards the ground. But then, KingDakar does something that neither Accelerator nor Dragster do. A freaking gigantic freaking airtime freaking hill on KingDakar. Yes, I have a shirt that actually says that. I seriously don't understand how people say that this airtime hill is pointless. This airtime hill delivers probably the longest moment of airtime I have ever experienced. It's so large and drawn out, and it is traversed with an insane amount of speed. I mean, after all, this element takes place on the world's tallest and North America's fastest roller coaster and all, so like, yeah. It's definitely floater airtime as you aren't going to be aggressively thrown out of your seat, but the duration of this floater hill is just unbelievable. This hill is definitely enough to make me prefer KingDakar over Top Thrill Dragster because this hill is just an incredible feature. Either way, when looking at the overall experience on KingDakar, it is a super freaking intense coaster, especially when you experience the launch in the front row as this thing absolutely shreds your face off. I don't find this ride to be any rougher than Dragster. They're both pretty rough, by the way. Nor do I find the restraints to be restrictive or uncomfortable. KingDakar is a legendary roller coaster that has been on my bucket list for years, and in my opinion, it is the most intense roller coaster that you can experience at Six Flags Great Adventure. Anyways, those are my thoughts regarding the coasters of Six Flags Great Adventure and how they compare to one another when it comes to intensity. Keep in mind that this list is solely based on my own personal opinions, and I fully understand that some of you might completely disagree with anything or literally everything on this list. So if that's the case, feel free to comment down below what you find to be the most intense roller coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure or the most intense roller coaster that you've ridden is. But anyways, if you did end up enjoying the video, then please remember to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you'll be alerted whenever I upload a new video. But until then, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.